Here we are a few feet away from where the Twin Towers once stood. That's the symbolism of this location. Let's start by talking about funding. We got the president's skinny budget a couple of weeks ago, and in response to that, the New York Police Commissioner, Jim O'Neill, said, under the president's proposal, nearly all federal funding to the NYPD would be eradicated. This funding is absolutely critical. It's the backbone of our entire counterterrorism apparatus. What is your message to New Yorkers who hear that message from the head of police here in New York City and worry about their security here in New York?
Right. The same message I'd give to any police chief or sheriff in the country, and that is Homeland Security, the federal government wants to work as close as we can with them in a collaborative partnership. So as we go forward with the budget, we'll see where the money is best spent. But I can tell you that the commissioner here is a friend of mine. I've just spent some time with him, and the collaboration just couldn't be better between my department and his department.
You oversee immigration policy in part here. New York has declared itself to be a so-called sanctuary city. We had a court decision from a district court yesterday saying that the federal government can't withhold funding to sanctuary cities. That's the job of Congress, not the administration. What's your response to that verdict from that district court? Well,
the immigration policy is founded in law. So people like me, my department, we execute the law. If the law is lost its relevance or is old or outdated or something like that, then the U.S. Congress ought to pass new laws or repeal laws. This particular court case, like so many other court cases, will work its way through the system. Clearly, the people, Attorney General, people like that in Washington and the federal government think that they have a case, and others think they have a case, and we'll just have to let the thing play out in court.
How does it complicate your job at this point? All of the legal machinations that are happening across the country now. So there's the sanctuary cities, there's the so-called travel ban. A lot is changing here. A lot is still very inchoate. Yeah. How does that make your job difficult at this point?
Not for me, not particularly hard. I mean, we still have unbelievable relationships with the law enforcement men and women. Most of the message to me when we talk, and we talk a lot, is, look, I have a boss. He's going off in this direction. Don't walk away. And so we all have bosses, and we'll find ways to work with people. I mean, I would imagine at the end of all of this, there'll be very, very few municipalities, cities, whatever, that are actually, by some definition, sanctuary cities that we won't be able to work with. It is hard for me to understand, to be honest with you, David, why any municipality would not want us to remove, convicted criminals that are in the process of being released from a jail or a prison. That is hard for me to understand. I will come to that prison, that jail, take that convicted illegal alien, no matter what they've done, and for free remove that individual from this community and transport them back to their country of origin. I cannot understand why anyone would want to stand in the way of that.
What is your message to an undocumented immigrant here in New York who is not a criminal, hasn't done anything criminal, but lives now with a new sense of fear in light of what's happened?
Well, the first message is behave yourself and wait it out. I'm just really hopeful, not necessarily confident, but hopeful that the U.S. Congress will get their arms around immigration and do what needs to be done. While I'm on that, there's a couple of types of immigration issues that we're dealing with. One is the men and women of ICE who are just, they're police first and foremost. They're tremendous law enforcement. They're moral, very well vetted men and women they're great patriots. Can't say enough good things about them. They don't do anything other than targeted operations, meaning they are now looking for illegal aliens that have some type of criminal conviction or infraction with the law. There's another aspect to removal, and that is an individual that has been in the legal justice system, and this takes years, 10, 12, 15 years, and that's even if they cooperate and don't disappear into the population. So you have ICE going after primarily on targeted operations individuals who are here illegally and are criminals, whatever criminal infraction they may have done in their lives. The other ones are people who are moving through the immigration system, and an immigration judge that does not work for me says, okay, you're out of appeals, now you're going home. And then we get phone call to come pick them up and remove them. So, but you got to remember, David, that ICE, DHS, we do not deport people. Law deports people. We just execute the law.
You're not on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not on Twitter.
Your boss is, the president is. This morning he tweeted, "Don't let the fake media tell you that I have changed my position on the wall. It will get built and help stop drugs, human trafficking, etc. On April the 5th, you said this to the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, quote, "It's unlikely that we will build a wall from sea to shining sea." Where do things stand now with the wall? Do you foresee there being a concrete fortification on the southern border of 2,000 plus miles?
Yeah, I foresee there being an increase in physical barrier backed up by the men and women of CVP, Customs and Border Protection, and technology. There are places along the border, and I would offer to you down in the southern Rio Grande Valley, where a concrete wall, makes all the sense in the world for a couple of reasons. One, it is a barrier, and two, it actually reinforces the flood provisions, or the flood
dual purpose.
Dual purpose, yeah. There are other places where a see-through wall, say a large ballad, if you will, fence, makes a lot of sense. There's places probably we won't build a wall because it's across riverbeds. We can't dam up the rivers. And there's other places that are just so rough. You know, the Big Bend area of Texas, canyons, high ground, low ground, you know, very little moves through there anyways. So we are all still committed to a barrier wall in some places see-through wall. But once again, technology and backed up by CVP. At the end of all of this, I think you have to remember the fact is that huge amounts of drugs, illicit materials, and people come across that border. So a physical barrier, as much as we can get in the right places, makes all the sense in the world. And if you get out on the border and talk to the local law enforcement or the CVP people, I mean, that's where I get that opinion. When I talk to the mayors along the border, the one thing they're concerned about, and they should allay their fears, because they're concerned about normal legal traffic back and forth to include commercial trucking, that kind of thing. President Trump has told me in no uncertain terms that securing the border does not mean an impregnable wall that cannot be penetrated by anything.
A literal wall, yeah.
So what he has told me is the normal movement of legal people back and forth, and there's millions every day that go north and south along that border. Tens of thousands of trucks, commercial vehicles, and vehicles go across. That will not be slowed down. In fact, if anything, we're working to speed it up.
You and the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, have highlighted the fact that over these last few months, immigration is down.
Yep.
Crossings are down. Does that take away momentum from this project? In other words, if rhetoric and enforcement of policy is bringing that down, is the case harder to make to build the kind of fortification the President has talked about?
Well, not in my mind, certainly not in the President's mind. I think right now what we're seeing is a significant reduction in the movement of people for a lot of different reasons I can go into if you want. But the point is, right now that movement is pretty minimal. But there are conditions down in Mexico, which is a very close partner and I would say friend of ours, and certainly in my case, I have great relationships throughout their government, and they're very cooperative with us, as we are with them. But the situation right now calls for a wall, and certainly if conditions change, that wall would be even more important. So just because we're having some initial success doesn't mean that over time a barrier where it makes sense, in whatever that barrier looks like, whether it's concrete or a see-through type wall with technology, with people, it will be necessary.
Is the figure that he's put forward, build this for less than $10 billion, make sense to you as you game this out?
You know, it's tough. I wouldn't disagree with that number, but he's a businessman. He, like me, we have not gotten specific because we don't know yet, because we haven't done the specifics on wall design, what it will take for, to acquire land, that kind of thing. But these estimates of $30, $40 billion, I mean, I don't know what it'll cost yet. And the people that are putting that out are just dreaming, making it up.
The bids are in. Have you begun to look at them? And when you look at how many companies or how many groups of companies might invite to make mock-ups, what kind of numbers are we talking about there?
I don't know, and I don't think if I did know, I should share.
Sure.
I mean, the fact is that I have to stay out of that because of contracting and protests and things like that. So the right people in DHS and the U.S. government that do that kind of thing and handling it within the law, ultimately we'll go down and take a look-see at what the industry people have come up with in terms of design and style and all of that kind of thing, and then we'll make some decisions.
There's this debate in Washington about government funding, and if there isn't funding for the wall in specific, there might be funding for enhanced border security. What does that encompass? What would that encompass?
Well, I mean, if there's no money for the wall, or there's minimum money for the wall this time around, there's a lot of, there's about 650 miles of barrier, I would say, is the best way to describe it. In some places it's concrete, vehicle control type concrete. There's other places. San Diego, as an example, has got a lot of fencing, low-tech fencing. You know, they're not chain link fence, they're much more than that, but over the years they've eroded, so we can repair that, and that's what I would look to do with any funds. And then, as I say, as time goes on, we start to budget for the wall that Mr. Trump has talked about so much. Then we'll start to fill in the blanks, if you will.
How do you, in your position, make this a less partisan issue? I'll read from another tweet here from April the 27th, a couple of days ago. Democrats used to support border security. Now they want illegals to pour through our borders. How does that rhetoric complicate your job here of making this immigration policy not a partisan issue?
I work with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on the phone regularly with the Senator Schumer on issues, and just as I am on the phone with members of Congress, I meet with the various caucuses, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Democratic Caucus, the Congressional Asia Pacific Caucus, on the Senate side, the Democratic Caucus. I'm available to them, do the best I can to explain what we're doing and the position, why we're doing it. It's entirely up to them as to how they interpret it. The only thing I do ask them is, you know, when we start the conversation, you're probably not going to agree with much of what I say, but let's, you know, kind of keep this at the adult level, and we'll have a good conversation. And at least you'll know what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we'll take it from there. But I'm an apolitical guy. You know, 45 years in the Marine Corps, and you don't spend much time worrying about politics. All you do is your job.
During your confirmation hearing, you talked about the motivations for people to come to this country, legally or illegally, to escape violence, for economic opportunity. What role does empathy play in the toolkit that you use for your job? Is a Homeland Security Secretary by default have to be someone who's coldly looking at the law, not weighing what motivations might bring people to the States?
Yeah, that's a great question. On the immigration issue, I mean, we legally take in 1.1 million individuals every year, 1.1 million from around the world. And there is a process to getting into our country legally. I don't feel as though, regardless of how I feel about the conditions in a given country, I don't feel as someone who's sworn to uphold the law that I can ignore laws. Now, the fact is, David, I don't have an unlimited number of agents, an unlimited budget, and you know, we can't round everybody up, and so I have to make priorities. I'm not ignoring laws, but I have to make priorities, and I do make those priorities. But I don't feel someone who's sworn to uphold the law, whether it's me, my ICE people, a police officer, or frankly the United States Congress, or for that matter, the governor of this state, can ignore laws.
We're 98 days into this administration. The president has called for tripling the number of ICE.
Seems like about 7 years to me.
I can imagine. The president's called for tripling the number of ICE agents. As you find your way around the office, find your way around the department, does that make sense to you? What's the argument for increasing the number of ICE agents?
It does make sense. I mean, 60 days ago, I probably couldn't answer this question, but the men and women of ICE are working nonstop to carry out the laws of the United States. The thing that takes huge amounts of time for them is, since they don't do sweeps, regardless of what you might hear and reported in the press or frankly from a politician, they don't do sweeps. They're coming after individuals. Now, when they're doing that business, it takes some time to accumulate target packages, if you will, where the person works, where they you know, shop, where they live, most importantly, and then in the most inefficient way, and that is to go to a neighborhood, knock on a door at 4 a.m. The advantage to what we do and to the safety of the community, as well as to my ICE officers, the advantage of going to a jail, as an example, is the individual is incarcerated. We know they don't have a gun. We put our handcuffs on them. The local community police take their handcuffs off, and off that person goes to their country of origin. The most inefficient way to do it is, in the most dangerous way, not only to my ICE officers, but to the community, is to go into a neighborhood at 4 a.m., knock on a door, and do their business. So that's why this advantage of cooperating with cities is so important to us.
Let's talk about a few of the things that you've done since you've been confirmed. You opened up a so-called voice office yesterday, right. Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. Explain what that is and the purpose of it. It's to air incidents, talk about incidents that have occurred where an immigrant has attacked, hurt, committed a crime against an American citizen. What after that? What's the purpose of setting up the office?
Actually, that's not the purpose of it.
Correct me,
yeah, the purpose of it is that a family that has suffered crime at the hands of an illegal alien can call our number, and we can simply tell them where that illegal alien is in the process of being deported or captured. So I was talking to some of the families yesterday. One of the families, they were ass-ended or hit from the rear. And the mother was there. She's severely handicapped because of that. The man's son was killed. And at least we can tell him that the illegal alien that did this has escaped prosecution because he was released on some bail, and he's now living in Mexico. And so we can tell them that, and that doesn't make them happy, but we can tell them that. Now, someday, if we ever get our hands on that guy, and he's back in our jurisdiction, and we turn him over for prosecution, then we can call that family and say we got him. Just a week ago, you may recall, there was a CVP officer murdered down on the border by illegal aliens. Brian Terry was his name. We, in cooperation, incredibly close cooperation with the Mexicans, took him into custody. He's now in Mexican custody, and I was able to call his mother and say we got him. Doesn't make the son come back, doesn't make her really happy, but makes her at least have a sense that there's justice going to be done. And that's what the Voice Office is all about.
You've implemented a ban on electronic devices, some electronic devices on commercial airliners going on some routes, leaving from some cities. And you've talked about the possibility of expanding that. Where might you and what might the timeline be for doing that?
Well, it could be everywhere, frankly. The threat is real. There are any number of cells out there that are doing their very best to figure out ways to beat our security. When I say our security, I mean our security as well as every airport in the world. The United States still has the best security in the world. It's the hardest target to get to, but it's also the target that they want to get to the most. So when I was briefed on some very serious intelligence about a very serious threat, and we focused on a part of the world where that threat was most likely to come from, I made a decision to inconvenience people so they are now no longer able to read their Kindles. They might have to actually buy a book or a magazine or talk to their kids or doze. But the fact is, their lives are more important to me than this small amount of inconvenience. But I can tell you, David, the threat is real. And this thing could expand. And I'm looking at it 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. It is the thing that keeps me awake at night.
How about the visa waiver program? You said you're looking at that as well. In looking at that, are you thinking about ending that particular program?
I'm certainly not thinking about ending it. But one of the threats to our European partners is there's a large number of their citizens, born and raised in many cases in their countries, that are fighting in the caliphate now. And as the caliphate is reduced by the coalition led by the United States, many of those fighters are leaving the caliphate, making their way back to Western Europe. Western Europe, the visa waiver program, probably most of the viewers don't know this, but is an arrangement with our closest friends and allies that have the best databases and the best way to identify people as to who they are, really good passports and that kind of thing, and pretty easy simply to get on an airplane and come to the United States. The concern is we have thousands of returned fighters, or certainly hundreds of returned fighters, that could relatively easily jump on an airplane because they're visa waiver countries and they're citizens of those countries and travel to the United States. So we're looking hard at how the Europeans are tracking individuals. Many of these individuals, as I said, don't know that they left Europe, the European Union, to go fight in the caliphate. So we're looking at that. Once again, focused entirely on protecting the flying public, not just Americans, but all human beings that get on an airplane in Europe or anywhere to go to any location, not just the United States. This is serious business. You
mentioned you were in the Marine Corps for 45 years. Now you're sitting in the White House. You're a cabinet secretary. What has surprised you most about making that transition? Do you look at government differently than you did before?
Yeah, now that I'm part of the government, I don't criticize it quite so much. It is an entirely different experience. Different people, good people, but very, very different. You never worried too much, even as a 4-star general, never worried very much about politics. You just ignored it. didn't worry too much about politicians, just ignored it. It was just noise, background noise. We were talking, you and I, a little earlier, the press, very different on the defense side than on, say, the domestic side. In their defense, they didn't have someone that had an attitude towards the press like I do, and that is outreach. So we're trying to create a core of individuals who, you never really like the story they're going to write, otherwise it's not news. But I'm committed to making sure that reporters have access to the information that we can provide, so that at least they can write, an accurate story, as opposed to something that's based on conjecture and maybe some pre-decisional draft copies of some document that probably would never have been signed.
There have been lots of reports of palace intrigue here over these last 98 days, as I'm sure you're aware. How has policy-making changed to the administration in those 98 days? Have you seen the way the administration approaches policy change already?
Well, any new team, and certainly the White House team was brand new. The good news is about the federal government, you have a large number of career folks who are the bedrock of the organization. Then you have people come in, political types like me, and as they learn the job, the career folks continue to run the presses, and the trains run on time and all. And then over time you get new people in, and those new people have to learn their job. I would tell you that the president's very involved. Not all presidents are, but he's very involved. He listens to his policy advisors in the White House, certainly listens to his secretaries. So I think going forward now with 98 days in, we're coming together, I think, as a team. Not that we weren't before, but again, there's always a learning process. One of the first things you learn when you're in a bureaucracy is what really is within the realm of the possible. You may want to do this, but you can only do it. You can only do that in fairly slowly, that kind of thing. And once you appreciate how the bureaucracy works, and I don't mean bureaucracy in a negative way here, but just a bureaucratic process. Once you learn that, and as I say, learn the art of the possible, then you really coalesce as a team.
Last question here, just about where national security policy is being made and run. There was a lot of criticism of the past administration that the NSC was very powerful. There was a rivalry between the NSC and the Defense Department, perhaps the Department of Homeland Security as well. You were at Southcom, perhaps you saw that play out. Are decisions being made less in the White House during this administration than they were during the Obama administration?
Yeah. 98 days in, I think what I'm seeing is a very healthy approach to national security, and that is the president and his team developed the policy with a lot of input from the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of Homeland Security, the CIA, DNI. Then when the decisions are made, they go let the professionals execute the decision. When I was in the Department of Defense, I had, and as a four-star general in Southcom, I had mild interest in what the NSC wanted me to do, beyond the policy of what the President Obama wanted me to do. I used to term them the field marshals in the White House would call down, tell us what to do and what not to do. Again, I would never take those calls. I looked at my boss, who was the Secretary of Defense, as coordinated through the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I executed the mission. And when I had a problem, I would either ask to speak to the Secretary of Defense, and I worked for three of them who were all, as a co-com, who were all great guys, and on a couple of occasions asked to see the President. I was only mildly interested in what the staff and the White House wanted me to do.